Good morning. This is John Richardson speaking with you from Toronto, Canada. Today is Tuesday, March the 11th, 2025. It is early in the morning in Toronto and later in the day for my guest, U.S. tax lawyer Virginia La Torre Jeker. And I am very pleased that she's agreed to participate in this immediate podcast to discuss her post that has been out for only hours, which discusses and draws attention to possible tax reform for Americans abroad. So this should be interesting. Here we go. Virginia, how are you today?
Hey, John. I'm great. Always happy to speak with you.
Likewise, likewise. Okay. Well, I woke up to this post and I thought, wow, isn't that interesting? So let's start with the basics. So I gather that you saw some discussion of tax reform in general, and that included some discussion of tax reform for Americans abroad. So far, so good?
Yes, spot on.
All right. Now, as always, your post was extremely well organized, and I would say that there are two parts, part A, part B. And I think part A of your post was really focusing on tax reform that was directly intended to benefit Americans abroad. And part B was, oh my God, here's a change coming in U.S. tax law generally that would have a positive impact on Americans abroad. So far, so good?
Yes, John, you're doing perfectly.
All right. Well, it's early in the morning. I haven't been up long enough to get overly confused, and I know you'll keep me on track. All right. So let's start with part A. I mean, think of it. The idea that Congress might actually be intending to do something to help Americans abroad. I mean, this is almost unprecedented, isn't it?
Well, I think it's well overdue, don't you?
Oh, I think it's well overdue. There's no question about that. All right. So, what exactly did they? Let's start off with what did they say? And then maybe we can lead into what they did not say. So, what do they say here anyway in this leaked memo?
Okay, so they mentioned a few things, and the ones that we are most interested in is to discuss what they said about Americans abroad. And they were talking just directly about the tax burdens on Americans abroad and how those could possibly be eased by some tax reform. And what they distinctly mentioned that we have from the memo is, gee, should we increase this foreign earned income exclusion that they are permitted? That was one discussion. And it was also discussed about exempting all foreign earned income from tax. So that would be a more radical shift.
All right. Now, let me stop you there because let's try to make this podcast as user friendly as possible for people who aren't, who are fortunate enough to not be tax literate in life. Okay. Now, to a lot of people, those might sound like exactly the same thing. Sort of A, increasing the foreign earned income exclusion, or B, not taxing foreign source income. But those actually are they're quite different things, aren't they?
Oh, they certainly are. So maybe we can educate people about that.
And there is no better person than you to do that. So here we go. Let's start with the first thing: foreign earned income exclusion.
Right. So under the rules that exist today, U.S. citizens and residents are, as we know, they're always taxed on their worldwide income. But if they are living and working abroad and can meet certain tests, like having a tax home overseas and meeting a physical presence test or something called a bona fide residence test, then they get to exclude a certain amount of foreign earned income. Oops. Now,
All right,
foreign
now
earned income.
you use the word earned income. Could I ask you to direct your attention to that earned income?
Yes. Earned income. What does that mean? It means that you have earned this income from your performance of services overseas. So it won't be covering items that are passive income that you might earn from investing abroad. For example, if you had a foreign government bond or foreign stocks and you're earning income from those, you might think, well, that's foreign income. I get to exclude it. No, you don't. It's got to be income earned for your performance of services overseas.
Okay, so to put it another way, it applies only to your job. I mean, I know that's a gross oversimplification, but if we visualize it, it applies only
That's,
to your job.
yes, that's a good way to look at it.
Okay, all right.
If you're
So,
self-employed, self-employment income you earned from your job.
right, okay. And I understand that there's a monetary limitation on that as well, right?
That's right. So for 2025, it's actually $130,000. That's a pretty decent amount of money.
Well, it's not bad if you consider that it applies mostly to employees, right? Mostly, because most employees are, are probably going to covered by that. But I don't want to delve on this too long. But do you think that it's generally wise for people to use the foreign earned income exclusion, even if they're eligible for it?
I think so much depends on their fact pattern. So for some people, it might be better to use foreign tax credits, especially, for example, if someone is a green card holder and they're working abroad, they may have issues, with their immigration status in the US if they're claiming they're a bona fide resident of a foreign country. So they may want to try and avoid using the FEIE.
So the key point, though, all I'm really getting at is it's not the only game in town in any case, right?
No, definitely not. And the issues would be examined, very carefully as to what's the most tax efficient thing for you to do.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. So going back to, they say, well, so we're going to increase the foreign earned income exclusion. Hard to know what that means, but at least it's a recognition that, hey, there's, some reform needed out here, right? Okay. Now, so we've talked about conceptually the foreign earned income exclusion. Now, if I could get you to direct your attention to, they start off with increase the foreign earned income exclusion or exempt foreign source income from taxation, right?
Yes.
Now, how is the statement exempt foreign income from taxation? How's that different? Okay. Or I think clearly more expansive, isn't it? How's that different?
Well, we don't know the precise differences, that they're thinking of, but foreign earned income for purposes of the FEIE, foreign earned income exclusion amount, is, as you mentioned, John, simply put, it involves income earned from your job. Exempting all foreign earned income from taxation, it's not really clear. Does this mean it's only going to apply to all income earned from your job, no matter what the amount is? In other words, even if you exceed the $130,000 threshold, you don't have to worry, it's completely exempt. Or does it extend to foreign source, like passive income as well?
Right.
We don't know.
I think that's exactly right. But there's another thing that occurs to me. So, I mean, clearly, to expand the foreign earned income exclusion means that, hey, U.S. citizens remain subject to tax jurisdiction. Yes?
Yes.
But this one, to exempt, to not tax Americans abroad on foreign source, that is, we don't know what that means. Theoretically, that's broad enough to say, well, we're relinquishing our tax jurisdiction over Americans abroad because everybody's always taxable on U.S. source income, right?
That's correct. Non-resident aliens are still taxed on U.S. source income by the system of withholding. And, maybe they're looking at such a radical shift. We don't really know.
Right. I suspect they don't know either, at this point. But I think it is interesting that the second possibility, exempting Americans abroad from taxation on foreign source income, you know, covers a range of options, right? Including, I think, completely severing U.S. citizenship from tax residency, although I think that's unlikely. But theoretically, it does include that, doesn't it?
It could, yes.
So that's pretty amazing stuff. So, Virginia, you've been at this for a long, long time, writing about Americans abroad and, all their their tax issues, okay, to keep it neutral. I mean, would you say that the really good news is that they're talking about this at all?
I think that is very significant. President Trump had also mentioned the tax burdens on Americans working overseas and that he wanted to eliminate those. So I think that this is clearly in the spotlight, and perhaps we're going to see some real traction here.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's important to stay positive and keep the pressure on because, particularly the second prong of that, no longer taxing Americans abroad on foreign source income. I mean, that's a very elastic idea. And, that could be real progress. I don't know, if expanding the foreign earned income exclusion, the problem I see with that is that clearly, by definition, Americans abroad would remain subject to U.S. tax jurisdiction, right?
Yes, for sure.
And that is, of course, a big problem. On the other hand, I mean, let's say that that's a given. The U.S. government will never free its citizens ever. Okay. Then, I mean, if you were tinkering around with the foreign earned income exclusion, I mean, what are some things you might do, to really give it traction and, make it very helpful? Well, here, I mean, for example, what about getting rid of the word earned, just foreign income? Would that be a help?
I would imagine so. Now you're moving into the more radical shift.
Well, I've always been conservative in this area, as you know. But anyway, so it's interesting. I mean, I think it's always easy to criticize in that, but there's a lot going on. I mean, there's the Trump pledge, there's the LaHood bill. There was even that thing that came from the Senate Finance Committee a few weeks ago that was seen to be endorsing recommendations of the taxpayer advocate. I mean, it wasn't a lot, but at least it was a recognition of the problems of Americans abroad. So I would say that optimism is the order of the day. Would you agree?
Yes.
You know, Now, moving on to part two here. So, in your blog, part B or whatever, that, oh my God, I mean, they're actually proposing things that might unintentionally help Americans abroad. And this is also almost without precedent, I think. So let's talk about how the idea of reducing the corporate tax rate to 15% could be a real bonus for Americans abroad.
Yes. I don't know if the drafters of this memo and the people who were discussing this realize the positive impact it would have for the American abroad that owns a foreign non-US corporation.
What's your guess, Virginia? Do you think that they were thinking about, do you think they were saying we must reduce the corporate tax rate in America to help Americans abroad? Do you think that's
No, they weren't thinking about it at all. And hopefully, when they do think about it, they don't carve out anything crazy, and that this reduction will continue and apply as I hope it will, and as discussed in my blog post. So if they reduce the US rate from the current 21% to as low as 15%, it will not only benefit the US corporations, which were clearly, to my mind, the target benefactors of this proposed change, but it would also have a significant effect on the CFC, Controlled Foreign Corporation, and the GILTI tax regimes. So, as you know, John, those tax regimes were designed to prevent U.S. taxpayers from deferring U.S. tax on income that was earned by the foreign corporations, but that was not paid out to the U.S. person. So, certain categories of income, for example, passive income items or even active income items that are low tax, those would be subject to immediate taxation under this anti-deferral regime. And the U.S. shareholder would have to pick up certain items of the corporation's income on his own tax return, even though he had never received a distribution from the company of that income.
I think that's worth repeating. Okay. Maybe I'll put it in my own words and then you can confirm. So, in other words, what this CFC regime is designed to do in the context of Americans abroad is to force the individual American abroad to pay tax on the income earned not by him, but by the corporation by attributing the income earned by the corporation never received by the shareholder to that shareholder on his tax return, right?
That's it in a nutshell.
So, in other words, from the perspective of the actual person being subjected to this, not the theoretician, they're paying tax on fake income they never received, right?
That's correct.
Wow.
Now, eventually, when they do receive that income, it will be taken into account that they've already paid tax on it. So you're not going to pay tax twice. But I think the point you're making is I have to pay tax on income I never received. Where am I supposed to get the money from to pay this tax?
Do you think it would be wise for Americans abroad to have a revolving line of credit to be able to pay taxes on money they've never received? Go to their
Well,
bank. Hi, I'm an American. I need a revolving line of credit to pay taxes on money I've never received to the U.S. government. What do you think?
well, I think, first of all, enough Americans have problems even getting bank accounts and so forth, banking services abroad, thanks to our friend FATCA, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. And I think if they went in asking for this revolving line of credit, it might cause further issues for them.
I think it's an interesting concept. Or private lenders could get into this loan sharking services for U.S. persons who need to pay tax on fake income. What do you think?
Yeah, that's an idea.
Well, it's a niche in the marketplace. Well, as bad as it is, Virginia, oh my God, they are actually inadvertently proposing something that will help on that. So tell me exactly how would lowering the corporate tax rate to 15% possibly help an American abroad?
Right. Well, I just want to say one thing before we delve into that is it could even be an American living in the States who owns a foreign company, and he's still going to have the same problem that we're talking about, paying tax on the pretend and fake income that he's never received. So keep using the term American abroad because mostly the American abroad is the person who has the foreign corporation set up to run his business or her business. But of course, there are many green card holders in the States that, have left their home countries and are residing in America, and they still have foreign corporations in overseas that are falling victim to this CFC and guilty tax regime.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff. If you're thinking of moving to America, beware because what you're doing is you're bringing all these sacred instruments of income and life in
Mm-hmm.
the best tax system. So, a gigantic problem, gigantic.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's interesting to me that so few people know about this.
That's the sad part. I know.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's listeners are in suspense. So how is this lowering the tax rate to 15%? How's it going to help these people?
Okay, so under the CFC, Controlled Foreign Corporation regime, there is a rule that says if the foreign tax the company is paying is at least 90% of the U.S. corporate tax rate, so our corporate tax rate is currently 21%, and if you were paying at least a 90% of that, you would be paying 18.9% tax in the foreign country. So if your corporation is having to pay tax at this at least 90% rate, then it's generally excluded from immediate taxation under the CFC and guilty rules. So you can use what's called this high tax exception to shield income and say, look, I don't have to pay under the pretend income regime of subpart F. I don't have to pay any pretend, income being taxed to me. I don't have to pay on that. And therefore, I'm free. I'm free and clear because I'm paying tax to the foreign country. My corporation is paying tax at least 90% of the US corporate rate. So if you apply the 90% now to the 21% rate, the corporation must be paying tax at least 18.9%. If the US tax rate, corporate rate drops to 15%, then that high tax exception threshold is going to drop accordingly, and it will be 13.5% as the foreign tax rate that the company must be paying in order to shield the shareholder from the pretend income inclusion. So,
Well, that's quite a drop. That's like a 5% drop, right?
yes,
So I mean, that would be extremely significant, extremely significant. And then I think
it
it's
will
worth
really expand which countries where people have US owned foreign corporations, that can benefit from this exemption.
absolutely, absolutely. I think it's worth noting that, and this is a point that I was, trying to make during the election, was that tax reform is always a hot topic, right? But the Democrats were wanting to raise the corporate tax rate to, I think, 28%, right?
Yes.
Now, one of the
Yeah.
points I was making is that would bring, you know, who knows how many more people, right, into this guilty and CFC problem, right?
Correct.
So,
Correct.
by bringing it down to 15%, I mean, it really is freeing, a whole group of people. Uh,
That's right. Their CFCs will no longer be subject to subpart F or guilty inclusion. And that's going to really simplify their tax situation.
oh, absolutely. It's going to do that and their life situation, everything. I mean, so, what's interesting about this is that, what we really have is accidental tax reform for Americans abroad. I mean, it's entirely possible for them to if asked the question directly, no, we hate our citizens in general, but especially we hate our citizens abroad. But B, we love our corporations, so we're going to give them a tax break. And oh my God, look, you just gave a benefit to Americans abroad.
Yes.
Well, this is interesting stuff, Virginia. Very interesting. And I liked your post, and I suspect that it will get a lot of views. I mean, I think a lot of your posts get a lot of views, but this one's going to get a real lot of views, I think.
I hope so.
So interest, and you're the bearer of good news. I mean, this is the key point, right? You're the bearer of good news. How does it feel to be the bearer of good news?
Oh, I love it, John. I love good things.
I mean, it's not, that's certainly the exception to the general rule here, right? Of just endless problems, but this is good.
Yes.
So, should we call this podcast "Accidental Tax Reform for Americans Abroad"? What do you think?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what it is. All right. Well, this has been wonderful. What are any other things that you think should be added? Anything else that's on your mind that you can tell the world about here before writing a blog post? Or where are we?
Well, I think everything's really in my posts, John. This memorandum also discussed the possibility of repealing the estate tax. So we're going to have to keep a close eye on that one.
Now that's interesting. Now that would also help Americans abroad, actually, wouldn't it?
Yes, of course it would. Of course it would.
Yeah. Of course, the question is what replaces that, right?
Yeah, the only problem, do you remember in 2010, the estate tax was repealed for 1 year, 2010?
Yeah, and everybody ran off to die.
Yes, everyone ran off to die. Some people were very disappointed they didn't make it as the clock struck midnight into
Oh my
2011.
God, I'm still alive. This is horrible.
Yes, exactly. This is terrible. Pull the plug. Anyway, what disturbs me about this whole thing is that it adds more complexity at the end of the day, because the estate tax will not be repealed forever. It's going to come back, and then we're going to have all these issues of, gee, when did the guy die? Did I get a step up in basis on those assets? No, I didn't. if the estate tax was not in place at that time. It's just going to create more complexity at the end of the day. That's how I see it.
I'm sure that's true. But I mean, Virginia, would you agree with me if I were to say that every American citizen needs a personal lawyer?
Ugh, I think it's true. And a personal accountant and God knows what else.
Yeah, I mean, it's really unbelievable. All right. Well, this has been a great conversation, a fun conversation, and let's hope that what is reported in your post has legs. Has legs.
Thank you. Well, people can find it at www.us-tax.org, and it's the most recent post, so it's right out there for people to read in more detail.
Yeah, and I would highly recommend Virginia's blog in general. All of her posts contain links to previous posts, which are great. But also, before signing off here, you're a Forbes contributor as well. I see you're.
Yes, I'm always contributing on Forbes. I contribute at least twice a month, generally in more like 3, 4, and 5 times a month, depending, what comes in of interest, because my area is Americans abroad and international tax issues. And there's always something coming up that's interesting to write about.
No end of topics there. All right. Well, this is great. Thank you very much, Virginia. I look forward to our next discussion.
Thanks, John. Have a great day.